Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Milsom again with another example of planning a composition. This one is about civil rights in the United States. Again, a reminder that this is a lead-in to the question and you can mention it in your composition and you should mention it, but actually the main attraction of this composition is this instruction here. And here you've got the word examine. Actually, they favour comment and discuss for these questions. They have those far more often, but a possibility is examine. What do you do when you examine something? You describe it and you explain it in detail. However, as I said briefly in the video conference, you can't do everything about the civil rights movement in the United States in the past and present in detail. There simply wouldn't be time, but you have to go into a little bit of depth. That's what it's asking when it says examine. It's sort of saying describe, question, explain. Okay. So I would start off with an introduction here. Here's my intro. And I would say that, yes, I would sort of reword the question, remember. Yes, that civil rights represents an important part of US history, and that civil rights is the fight for rights within the country. It's all about fighting for equality. Okay. Then I would transition into saying that, and I would say I think that the main concern of civil rights over the years in the United States has been for African Americans, and that this is because African Americans live even now with a legacy of slavery, and that was a time of oppression where people were owned by other people. They had no rights, no human rights. They were treated as possessions. Okay, so I think I would start with that and say that although slavery was abolished in the late 1800s, that the struggle to have equality continued right the way through to the 1960s, and you could say that it's even ongoing today, that it's still relevant today. And I would then talk about how slavery was abolished, but these Jim Crow laws for segregation were enacted. Do you remember looking at those? It's things like the idea that blacks and whites had separate schools, that blacks and whites couldn't drink from the same water fountain or use the same toilets, that they had different hairdressers, different bars where they could drink. And so although slavery had gone, black people still lived under segregation that was legal by made legal by the Jim Crow laws. And from the beginning of that, people started to resist. People started to resist. They started to say, we don't accept this, we campaign against it. And that is the beginning of the civil rights struggle. Yeah, the fight, the struggle. And then I would go on to talk about non-violent resistance. This movement was led by Martin Luther King, but you could also, do you remember this name? Rosa Parks. She refused, let's do a little drawing, why not? She refused to sit in the black seats on the bus, and as a result started this huge movement, a bus boycott. So the various methods of non-violent resistance, they didn't fight, they didn't kill people, they resisted non-violently as a protest, okay, as a movement against. And then I think I'd leave talking about history. This bit's all about the past, but the question asks me to write about the past and the present. So then I think I'd move on to now, Black Lives Matter, which campaigns primarily, it started because young men were being shot by the police. And people campaigned about the idea that their lives were being treated as though they meant nothing because the police could shoot them and there'd be no recourse in justice. Policemen would get away with that. And so this idea that Black Lives Matter, which is a hashtag, yes, and is a real internet campaign, but also a real protest movement, continues the civil rights struggle for African Americans. Now, I'd be drawing to a close by then, and my last point would be that sadly, there's still a determined struggle for civil rights in the United States. And I'd say that as well as African Americans, there's a struggle for immigrant rights, there's a struggle for gay and lesbian rights, and there's a struggle against anti-Muslim sentiment. Now, those, you'd have to be really quick and smart about mentioning them. But they are part of the civil rights struggle. Civil rights, although when we immediately think of it, we think of African Americans, it extends to all groups who suffer from oppression. So I'd finish off with that, a quick mention that it was also other groups, and then I would bring my conclusion. And remember, my conclusion must draw me back to the question and my introduction. And I'd conclude by saying that we've shown that inequality is a big part of US culture, that yes, it's a country full of advantage, yes, it's a country full of opportunity, but there is such division and inequality based on race and other qualities, other characteristics, and so there will always be struggle now and in the future. Okay, I hope that's useful. I said to somebody in the conference that when you get a question like that, of course you've got a choice of 2 questions in the exam, but say this was your best option. These are the questions you should be practicing this week. The ones that make you think, no, then you should give them a bit of a go at planning them. Okay, I hope that was useful. Quick run through, quick reminder, maybe have a look back in your challenge book about the civil rights and inequality in the United States. Thanks for watching. Bye.